Welcome to the Software People Stories. I'm Shiv.
I'm Chitra,
And I'm Gayatri.
We bring you interesting, untold stories of people.
associated with the creation
Or consumption of software-based solutions.
You'll hear stories of what worked.
and sometimes what didn't,
You will also hear very personal experiences.
and insights that would trigger your thoughts.
And inspire you to do even greater things.
The last year or more has been a tough one for all of us, and the second wave of COVID-19 has been much worse. To help those affected by the pandemic in India, the podcasting community has come together under the hashtag #PodForChange banner to raise funds through an exclusive NGO partner, Give India. Please join PM Power Consulting and the Software People Stories and hashtag #PodForChange as we look to make a positive impact in the lives of those affected by COVID-19. Please visit the link in the description. Someone really needs the help. Being a brand ambassador for the organization, working across different cultures, and how her upbringing shaped her perspective and helped her in the HR role, being the backbone of background processes that enable employees, partnering with the business, and other aspects of her role and experiences. Listen on.
Hi, Amrita. Welcome to the Software People Stories.
Hi,
Thank-
Gayatri.
Thank you so much for being here. You're one of the few people from the HR area who have appeared in our Software People Stories, and we are happy to have you here.
Thank you so much, Gayatri, for having me. Yeah, I look forward to this conversation as we go through the course of this.
Would you like to introduce yourself to our listeners, Amrita?
So, I come with about, I'm an HR professional, and from a career choice perspective, I come with about 22 years of HR experience, out of which 14 years has been in the IT and ITES space. So in some sense, therefore, I come from the tech industry. But besides that, I have worked across multiple other industries as well. I've worked in retail, I've worked in manufacturing, I've also worked in HR consulting. So it's been a mixed bag of experience. I did start my career in hospitality in hotels. And, it's been a long journey since then to, kind of be working, in the tech space.
Fantastic, Amrita. I know many of the HR professionals who have joined with experience have come from the some other industries, not necessarily homegrown, so to speak, from a technology perspective, right? Tell us your early times of being in the hospitality or manufacturing. How has that being in HR compared to in technology?
So they're completely different worlds to begin with, right? It's like you can be on two different planets. I started with hotels. I used to be a management trainee with the ITC group many years back, and hotels is a very different industry from 25 years back to what you see now. And that was really about being hands-on, getting into the nitty-gritties, getting into the details, and it was extremely people intensive, right? I mean, your days were just about meeting people, talking to people, and it was, I don't think I had a machine. I think we all had shared computers that we used to access. From there, I actually moved on to banking and customer service. And, these were really not these are my pre-HR days. And it was then that I actually developed a whole inclination towards people. And is when I was actually looking to do my master's. And the most natural choice for me was to graduate towards a discipline that got me to work with people. And that obviously to me was HR. So that's how I bumbled my way, if I can say, into the entire HR space. And, did my master's, finished that up and started off in HR. And interestingly, even then it was back in 99 is when I finished college. And I started with executive search. It was just up and coming those days. And then as I was headhunting somebody for an opportunity, they basically turned around and said, I'm not looking for a job, but I'm looking for someone for my team. So why did you come over? And it was an interesting conversation and a discussion. And I ended up, moving into what was a fairly sunrise industry back then in 2000, which was the .com industry. So I was part of, and that was actually my first foray into technology for a .com. And I was part of the startup team, and it was very interesting because I was actually helping. And when I'm saying startup, I mean, I was actually helping even find spaces to work out of. So it was that basic. and probably employee number 4 or 5 or whatever it is, for that startup division of a much larger conglomerate. I moved to Bangalore, and Bangalore, like is really the IT capital, so to speak, of the country. So I kind of got to hear so much more buzz around the whole tech space then. From .com, I also graduated towards doing the brick and mortar. It was a retail .com. So I kind of moved on to managing the brick and mortar stores, and I was in a core retail industry where I used to work in the stores, right? So retail stores. I helped set up stores. So it's extremely hands-on again. I remember working out of the warehouse because that's where HR was. There was nothing fancy, no fancy gigs.
Wow.
Yeah, it was really really interesting times back then. Huge amount of learning, and the learning really came from just meeting people and being in operations. That slowly led to me moving into HR consulting. I continue to stay in the retail consulting space. I, did a bit of consulting in the manufacturing industry, worked with some big manufacturing houses. It was as part of that journey, Gayatri, that we had some of our clients again in the tech space. So that was my second innings, so to speak, or second, interaction with technology. Again, just so happened that I was looking for a change. The client said, you work with us, why don't you come over? And obviously all of this is with the necessary sign-offs to say, hey, can I move to a client organization? And so I moved there, and that's where I think my tech journey started back in end of 2003. So that's
Okay.
going to be close to 18 years, in the tech industry space. And that's when I first time I even heard of things like C++ and Java and .NET and, CCNA. And I would be like, really, what's all of this? I had come from a completely different experience. And yeah, it was exceptionally good. It was, completely a new learning for me, just trying to understand what it meant, what do those alphabets actually mean, right? Because for me it was really alphabets, right? I mean, what happened behind that, just trying to understand the science behind it. From there I moved to one of India's largest IT services firms, and I
Okay.
spent the next 14 years of my career in that space. So
Oh,
that's what I did before I moved to technology.
sounds like, you had even though you said HR, it sounds like a mix of data warehousing, operations, a level of leadership, setting up things before you got into the foray of technology. Tell me about it when you joined the whole tech industry, right? You said you were sharing a computer. And nobody used to use a computer in the early days. It used to be, you had a book, you had all of that in place, and then, in
Yeah.
the end of the day, somebody added that data entry job, it used to be called. How did that change when you think about purely as a using technology?
Yeah, I think for me in the initial years of my career, and even if I don't know if it qualifies as technology, I think it was really only email. Like you rightly said, everything else was in notebook, right?
Okay.
Including marking your attendance. There was this age-old system of, registers, and one had to sign in. I'm not giving away my age, of course. Neither am
Of course.
I, neither am I saying, that I worked with the organizations which weren't that, ready from a systems perspective. But I think that's really what was, the reality then. With a smaller workforce, you just managed like that. And, I remember the entire HR department had one computer. So there were some 5 of us, and we actually would take turns because we knew we would get emails on it. And it wasn't like what I kind of gotten used to later, right? So we all had our slots, and and since sometimes you would get a phone, no mobile phones also back then, right? So you were dependent on a landline, and then somebody would call and say, hey, I've sent you an email, and you're like, okay, wait, let me go and log in and check. And then you go through that process of asking for the computer, logging in, and you had to dial because there was no the internet connections also were different, right? So we had to dial up, and then by the time you get through, and then you go, it used to be such a huge process. I don't know if it was even efficient. What it did do, of course, was save time because it was an email, it came much faster. But just the whole process, from then to now, sometimes it just seems like, did I actually get through, that phase of, starting work in that setup, and moving to what I, jokingly sometimes refer to as a email HR manager, because you suddenly find yourself spending a lot of your productive hours actually on mail. The amount of work that gets done now is so, based on the communication that we use versus earlier.
In fact, amount of work that gets done over emails. When I say emails, you send us attachment, you ask for data, you ask for from information, decisions, everything that
Mm-hmm.
happens over email. So are you also seeing some of the systems change over a period of time
Yeah,
when you are looking at
absolutely.
it?
I think there's obviously a whole lot more efficiency, right? It's more effective. Somewhere I also think that therefore there's also a lot more layers of complexity sometimes. I think, like, when I look back sometimes saying, so, when I joined as a management trainee, what did I go through? Of course, it was a different industry versus what I see some of the youngsters who join the workforce now go through. We were so much about meeting people, right? We were so much about face-to-face conversations, and and I know I'm sounding terribly old school right now, Gayatri,
No, no,
but
no. That's what we need today, actually.
right? I mean, I know of people who have gone through, and I'm not talking about COVID. Obviously, now all of us are at home, right? But I'm saying pre-pandemic also. While I think the good thing is technology has given us the flexibility to work from anywhere, to work, with global teams, to collaborate a lot more. Obviously, the benefits completely outweigh anything else, but just sometimes the constructs in terms of how we work, they're just so different, right? I mean, it is okay, I know of people who haven't even met another person for a year, but you've been conversing on email and getting work done through that, for the last year. And have you been productive? Of course. Have you met what you needed to do? For sure. Sometimes, I just asked them, I said, hey, did you just get up and go and, meet them? They're like 2 buildings away. And they're like, really? I mean, the work's happening on the system, it's happening through, email. So why do I need to? And it's a very different mindset. For me, even today, if I'm starting to talk to someone, I always try and see, especially if we're in the same campus, we're in the same city, same campus, same facility. I definitely reach out and say, hey, do you want to meet for a cup of coffee? And, someone who, if they're much younger, is wondering why, what did I do? Why do I want to meet HR? Can't I just interact with HR on email? Because if you need to meet HR, that's not a good sign.
What was various roles that you had taken up within HR? I know from a standard technologist, right? Normally you have ladder, so to speak, or horizontal or vertical ladders, if you speak, right? Even though HR is supporting and it's always there, for a novice, they don't really know what all functions within HR is there.
Mm-hmm.
The only ones that you really know is payroll and
Hiring.
the recruitment. But it's a lot more nuanced as that, right? So what were your various roles that you had taken up, and what were the challenges like?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Spoken like someone who's so truly not from HR, right? I keep getting asked by some of my friends, what do you guys do in HR? Do you even work? So I said, no, we don't. Yeah, we just listen to music and we just chill, right? But no, I think there's just, and I think it's a great question, Gayatri. So let me try and, break this down from a function perspective, right? And again, it depends really on the organization. There are some organizations where they've created niche areas and segments within the entire HR function, right? There are some organizations which run it end to end. Theoretically, if I had to just kind of step back and give you that quick pitch on theoretically, HR encompasses everything, right? I mean, traditionally, it's from hiring all the way up to retirement, right? So from hire to retire, anything and everything that an employee experiences with an organization, you can be rest assured that there is somebody from the HR function who's aware of it, who has helped curate that experience, and I'd like to think the good experiences, not the bad ones. Yeah. And who's actually been there, and there are either systems, processes, policies, framework, career, I mean, everything HR is involved at some point. Yeah. It's not just the recruitment and it's not just payroll, though of course as an employee I think these are the two really important ones that they directly see or that directly impact them. So I don't I mean, I can understand why sometimes employees think that HR is recruitment or HR is I go to only when I don't get paid, right? I get that part of it. Now having given you that whole overview of what HR could be in terms of just the larger parts. Personally, for me, I've also worked the entire segment, right from hiring all the way up till helping someone as they've retired out after a long career with us. And there are different aspects of it, and if I had to break that down again, I think largely there would be the entire recruitment touch points, and some of these are more front ending, where you actually have a customer face, you represent the organization, you're really the first person that a prospective employee actually interacts with across levels, whether it's on a management campus hiring, or whether it's engineering, or whether it's even lateral hiring. So therefore, recruitment, I think, becomes extremely important in terms of just being the face of the organization. And it's just so important in terms of how we are brand ambassadors, so to speak, of organizations in terms of our values, culture, what you see. And I think what we do in recruitment really is the HR piece is not talking about the job, because for that you've got the ops guys, right? You've got the techies to help us with that part of it. We are doing all the warm, woolly, fuzzy, the fluffy stuff that you talk about in terms of what you get, what are your career aspirations that could possibly be met, career story, I mean, growth, what's the kind of framework. So I think it's about that whole piece that you get to talk to a potential employee about. So I've done that. The other big piece that one gets to do as you come in, and if you had to actually do a mind map or just visualize a career journey, and you come from the corporate, so right, you come in, you've got onboarding, so you've got teams over there, and then it's really about getting to your job. So that whole induction process, helping someone settle in, that I think largely lies, of course, with the hiring manager and the team that they join. But I think HR really helps with just doing those initial touch points, right? I mean, we've kind of gotten into saying, can I meet somebody at a 60-day, 90-day, just a quick check-in to say how are things going. Of course, in technology, especially with some of the larger firms, when you're hiring in the thousands, it gets difficult. So one has to be, one has to really, really plan for it. And, you have to have teams that actually make the time to say, once a month, I will meet all new joiners, right? Or once in 6 weeks, I will meet all new joiners. I can't do it one-on-one, but at least even if I meet as a group, it's a good touch point, right? At least they know who it is. There's a face to HR. We move from being an email inbox to actually being a human behind it, and not some bot that's managing those responses to mails. And but largely I think HR and in the IT organizations is really about business partnering, right? It's about how do you enable business, how do you empower employees, how do you build careers. And again, over there, it's important to understand the business. And like I said, that's where I think my whole journey with technology began, because I started understanding terms. While of course I can't code, I don't understand code, but I had to still sit down and at least make the effort to understand what did they mean by it. When someone said that I was doing a project manager's job, what did project management mean?
What does it mean? Yeah.
How do I then, therefore, how can I understand what is it that is required from a skills perspective, from a competency perspective, to do that job. And once you get an understanding of that, then it helps me as an HR person establish that foundation of saying, okay, so what next for this individual? Here are their skills, here are their strengths, how do we actually use it, how do you help them build careers? And then of course you meet some of the folks who say, what, I don't want to do project management, I don't want to do people management, just leave me, I'm very happy coding. I just want to build, I just want to create, I don't want to do this whole people management and all of the noise and the headache that comes with that, or the challenge that comes with that. Those become your tech specialists, right? Then whether they're getting into a stream that's like an architect, or whether they continue to work on some specialized skills, and what kind of career paths do you draw up for them. So I think a lot of the HR that you don't see, or that employees don't see, is because they're working in the background actually towards creating these career frameworks, right? And of course, like I said, we work very closely with the operations team, but at least being able to understand what are the different career paths. Is there a technical stream? Is there a project management stream? Is there a sales stream? Someone wants to aspire to move into sales, how does that happen? the whole growth from project manager to account to, delivery heads and so on and so forth, and that whole journey for them. So that's again a very big part of what HR does.
Makes sense actually, Amrita. If I think about it, right, when I started my career 2 decades back, that time the only real career movement was that after you spend a few years, you get into people management. That's the only way organization was even recognizing that you were promoting, right? What you talked about, tech specialist, deepening your skill. I think that itself was missing at that point in time, simply because it was just number game. And you've been part of the transformation to say, okay, there is value, and not just from a value perspective, but also people also are more satisfied in doing what they
Mm-hmm.
want to do. I think that's a big change, right? I think you're right, in terms of, it's truly behind the scenes, and organizations which have done well are the ones who have really scaled
Absolutely.
themselves in front of taking more complex programs, taking more innovative work, and so on and so forth, right?
Yeah.
See, when you were speaking about it, one of the things that comes into my mind is that, do you also have technologists who have become HR professionals along with you, given the kind of a cool work that you're doing in terms of having people, coaching them, empowering them, and so on and so forth? Have you got such people also whom you have interacted with?
Absolutely. And, it's great that you brought that point up, because we do have, so, there's this growing trend, increasingly, and I think that I'm saying growing, it's really been there for the last at least, 10 years plus, where you would find a lot of folks joining the IT industry, straight after engineering as, in terms of in the software field, or, in the technology space. And after 2 years going to do their MBA. So some of them actually choose to do it in HR. So when we hire from some of the leading campuses, when I've been a part of that, I have seen people who join us who have worked as engineers. So and I think they come in with this added advantage of understanding the integrities of the business. Right? So for someone like me who moved into it, I didn't come from an engineering background. I just happened to, after, I think I joined a technology industry 6 years into my career. Still fairly early, but not that I started off from there. So there was a learning curve in terms of just understanding what did it mean, what was project, what was the project management team, what were modules, what was the module lead. I mean, all of those terms, but to have someone having worked in it, understood it, being a part of the team, I think they come in with a lot more empathy, as well as a lot more wisdom about, so what are the options, right? They also come in wearing that whole hat of, what's the kind of life that someone who's in the technology space wants, what are they thinking, what do they want to do. And I think wearing that hat while designing some of our programs or giving inputs for some of the people practices, I see it as making a huge difference. So we have had people who've come in and, just chosen to work on the people aspect from a completely different angle. Or like you said, I've also had business leaders who've moved into HR, who have been kind of, and either they moved through the whole workforce management space or through recruitment or even into core HR, because, they just, some of them just know that they love the whole point about working with people and being able to shape career. And, the organization I worked with was very, very open to that whole fungibility of skills and talent. So it was great.
I mean, so for example, the company that I right now working with, right, in DBS, they have created this program where any new person who joins, they get to interact. May not be in a one-on-one basis, but they get to interact with the senior leadership. It's like a fireside
Hmm.
chat where you get to hear them make decisions, how they have grown within the company. That's a way of inculcating culture. If you think about it, when I joined, I said, okay, I mean, wow, somebody at a CXO level is spending 1 hour in talking to new hires. I mean, if you think about it, I said that is one, and then I later realized it's an HR function. What they have done is that they have actually made sure that the time is blocked with those senior leaders, the executives. They have to spend time with the new hires. I think when you were speaking about onboarding, right?
Hmm.
Somebody who gets into that culture of organization. I think those vital parts we often do not see as technologists, because we think, you have programs, you have delivery, you have all of that. Getting a person from culture
Hmm.
A to culture
Hmm.
B and making that transition as smooth as possible. That is what makes that loyalty, makes that, be able to take those leaps and bounds for your firm. Right? I think very cool way of talking about, one-on-ones or being the partner in the whole journey.
Absolutely. And you're right. I think HR is behind the scenes on all of that. So, like I said, right, everything that an employee experiences, I think the underlying fabric or the lining is always something that HR has created, right? That whole net that you then therefore build off, I think would be from there. So you're absolutely right. These programs are there, and it doesn't make sense to for HR to sit and front end them, because we you don't necessarily create those linkages, because it's so much better to hear it from the leaders, right? To just listen to their stories to figure it out. So I think in that sense, HR has always also been one big charter for us, is to make things happen, right? And like I said, it's usually behind the scenes. How do you create that impact?
We've often seen more people on the playing 11. If you look at today, right now it is IPL season,
I
right?
know.
You are part of the playing 11. You want to be part of the cynosure of individuals. We know that the number of support staff, be it from a recruitment perspective or the leadership, is a big one that is going behind the scene. How difficult is it for you as a person? I know you've been in this industry for long, but do you sometimes wonder that, why am I not getting the limelight? Do you get such thoughts at all?
Personally, no. I think it's not that HR is not, getting mind share or doesn't get the visibility. As a function, of course, it does. People see us at on multiple occasions. You do have messages that come in from the HR head, or from HR leaders. Unfortunately, for if you talk to employees, they always associate the not so great news as, oh, those guys in HR, they decided this. Oh, there's no hikes this year. Oh, it's those guys in HR, right? I didn't get progress. It's those guys in HR, right? So you kind of become the by default the punching bag for employees, which actually is not true. It's not true at all. Right? Those decisions are organization decisions. They're decisions that are made by business leaders in conjunction with HR, right? So I think HR, therefore, that's why we're called an enabling function, right? Where you enable, just business to run more. You enable how do you meet, your business goes through people. So in that sense, you are in the limelight sometimes for the wrong reasons. You kind of get pushed in up front, when you have to convey the not so great news. But more often than not, I also think it's all of the good things that you do. And as employees also grow in an organization, as they get to interface more, they also get to see the value, right? And like you just said some time back, the whole fabric of culture, while front-ended by leadership, which is across the board, I think it's built on the lining, of what HR kind of puts together, and multiple other such things, right? Whether it is on the whole diversity piece, whether it's on, just like I said, career frameworks, what do you do next, the benefits that organizations have, the differentiation that we do from one organization to another, what we do for employees, all of that is, it always has an HR angle. So yeah, but to your question, personally, I've never ever felt that, hey, why am I not there up front? We are there when it's required. We are there in meetings. I've had the advantage of working with, at least for me, one of the best business leaders that I had. I remember, whether it was great news or not so great news, he always made sure he had the delivery head, the finance head, and the HR head, and I was playing that role. He would say that, he said, I won't go into a meeting without the three of you, right? So
Okay.
whether it's to talk about the good things or the not so good things, this is the team that goes in together. And it was actually through him that I got so much of my whole appreciation for business. Even recently when I was talking to him, I told him, I said, if I understand technology, if I understand business, that whole credit actually goes to him. That he gave me that platform to be able to not be seen as administrative and operational, but to be seen as a function and an individual who actually made an impact.
It does take a lot of vulnerability from the leader to say, hey, this is my team which did it, not just me as a hero who came and did it, but it's a team which did it. And that brings a lot of servant leadership to say, okay, hey, this team did it and I'm enabling, not just from a functions perspective, but also the
Absolutely.
leader as an enabler.
Absolutely.
So when you talk about different cultures, right? Some of the things that are running in my mind is when you work with different geographies. I know you worked with different geographies, right? So how has that worked? Any funny stories there?
Yeah, they've so yeah, so I in my most recent role, I've been leading HR for what we call the geographies, which meant really about 12 different countries globally. It's just been still interesting learning for me personally the last 5 years, because HR is seen contextually so different based on the country. All of my experience so far has been large. I mean, I've been based out of India throughout, right? So while I've managed global roles sitting out of India, but my experience of working with leaders has always been someone who's based over here, or who's more Indian in their entire context and cultural context as well, or their work context as well. It's been very interesting for me. I don't know if they've been funny stories, but they've definitely been a lot of learnings, a lot of insight. Right from whether it is China, or from China, the Philippines, Eastern Europe, parts of Latin America. I think HR is just seen so differently in each of these countries.
So how
Uh,
different? Can you give some examples on it, Amrita?
Yeah, sure thing, Gayatri. And like I said, this is my experience, so I don't mean to, kind of broad brush that for, the entire country, so per se.
Oh,
Yeah, like, when I remember talking to folks in China, for them, HR is very administrative, right? And I think it just comes from the whole mindset of, have I got payroll? Did I get my leave? That's about it. And I think that's evolving. I can see that in the last 5 years itself of having worked very closely with the country, where now they're starting to say, oh, okay, I can go to HR to talk about a career, right? I can talk about what next. I just don't need to go and talk about only my salary didn't come in time, or I wasn't happy with my increase. And I think that's really from those conversations around career, or the higher order needs, so to speak, are somehow always seen linked only with ops, and HR is seen more from execution. So for them, to understand that, we actually do more, we help design, we help develop, we can actually talk about helping you unlearn, relearn, reskill, so I think those are some interesting conversations for me as well with some of the leadership, to say, hey, it's possible. You don't need to move jobs or move organizations because you want to do something differently. We'll be able to give you that within, the current work environment itself. From there to moving to probably other countries in some of the APAC regions, where HR is seen more as the
okay.
fun champion, someone who's in charge of just making work fun, or just being available. Sometimes I think we end up just being everybody's sounding board. I have a problem, who do I go to? Let's go to HR. So we kind of end up being not the agony aunt, thankfully, but still in some sense, at least helping. We become the fixer,
Okay. Okay.
right? And I think that in itself is huge responsibility, because if employees are coming to you to get issues resolved and fixed, is because they have that innate faith that if I go to this team, I know I will come back with a resolution, right, or a solution. And I think at the end of the day, if I look at it, there is a definitive commonality, and it's very largely also, Gayatri, dependent on what the organization per se creates as, what does the function stand for. And like I said, I've been lucky to work with an organization where HR is fairly empowered, visible, has a seat at the table, is not relegated to the basement and below in terms of what you need to do. So I think in that sense, from a function perspective, people saw us as going to us, knowing they can get a fix, knowing they can get a solution. I also think if I look at the individual cultural context, sometimes there was that hesitancy to say, can I come? What will happen? Like I said, earlier, oh, I have to actually go meet HR, because meeting HR in some cultures really meant the end of the road, right? it doesn't necessarily have a positive connotation. So I think those have been, some of the stories. I also think, in some parts of some of the other countries I've worked with, where they themselves culturally probably are evolving as a country themselves, right? From moving to being more liberal in their own thoughts and in the way they work, from a, let's say, more of a communist regime to being more, open. I think there I've seen definitely this culturally where people see HR as being the policeman, as being more authoritarian, or as being in control of all the policies and procedures and processes. And if HR says yes, then we'll do it. If anything, you go get approvals. So I think for me, those are the finer bits that I've kind of seen across different countries in terms of how HR is viewed internally, or at least in someone's head. Even though as an organization, that's not the culture you're building, and you're trying to define the function charter very differently. But somewhere, your own personal experience kind of comes in the way to how you would, as an individual employee, just view HR.
Very true. In fact, I mean, when you're speaking, right, the Hofstede model in terms of countries and culture, how that all those things come together. Very interesting perspective from where you sit across. Can you tell me? I know you are a very people person. You always are very approachable. Does it have to do with your upbringing? I know your family comes from a military background, and
Yeah.
what that has impact.
I think if I look back now, I think looking back, maybe it has influenced me in some way, right? Maybe it has. I think there are multiple things that have shaped me. Coming from a defense background, one got to move every 2 years because my dad got posted, and we therefore moved. And every time you move, you're just meeting new people, right? You're making friends all over again. It's like, it's like the clock gets reset. You're just about settling into a school, and then you moved every 2 years. Luckily for us, or we didn't move that often. So I think I didn't really move schools so much, but I moved houses within a colony, or you move to another area within the defense camp. So it is, my school was steady, but the friends you made, and also people would keep getting posted in and out. So you just grew up. It is, I grew up being exposed to just needing to meet people all the time. So I personally, if you ask me what makes me tick, I love people's stories, right? In fact, when I was thinking about, when you had said to, come on to this podcast and just talk to you, and I was saying, if I ever had to do this, I think I would do a podcast on people and their life stories and their journeys, because it is just so fascinating for me. And who knows, right? I might actually build on that at some point in time, come back to you for some stories for sure. But yeah, I think that background helped, that, you met with new people. And then I grew up in a family where, my parents were, my mom especially is exceptionally involved in the entire community space and, working with the community. So I saw her going out of her way, meeting people, helping people, just empowering them, right? And I remember something that she told me very early on, in my life, was about this whole thing about, either you teach someone to fish, right? There's that whole thing. You can either fish, if someone's hungry, you either provide them with the food, or you fish for them and, you give them that, or you teach them to fish and you really enabled and empowered them and, skill them for something that they can do lifelong. And I think that somewhere very early on sat in my head. And I think that's where my whole thing for people has come from, right? Just seeing that around me, figuring out how do you want to help people. Every time I've talked to someone who's wanted to quit, trying to understand why, right? What's your trigger? Why do you want to quit? What is it, what is it that you can't get over here that you're getting outside? How do we help you? So I think that whole stepping out of my comfort zone to help someone, to enable them to do better, I would think has also come from, just my whole exposure and experience growing up across multiple countries, cities, that whole thing.
So nicely put, Amrita. See, some of these, right, you learn early on, not just we doing ourselves, but also us seeing how the society around us functions.
Absolutely,
You,
absolutely.
you do it without any expectation that you're doing it. I think that sort of karma just comes back to you
Yeah.
in a multiplied fashion, if you like. So
Yeah, absolutely. And you don't realize it at that point in time, which is why I said, right, just reflecting back, what's made me where I am today. It's just so many things that have kind of positively, just shaped me to who I am today. So even just being approachable, I think 30 years back, someone might not have said that about me. They would have said, hey, really, do we want to talk to her? But I've learned that on the job, right? I've learned to put on my people face, right? I've learned to put on, otherwise I'm actually an introvert. I could sit in a meeting and you wouldn't even know I was in that room for 5 days. But I have learned on the job to be able to, step out of my comfort zone, to meet people, talk to them, just be available to help. That's something that I've learned.
That is important from a technologist, right? Because from an outside perspective, it looks like the number of lines of code or how many issues do you fix, but that's not who you are. You are a human being with your problems, with your highs, lows, motivation. So you need that a sounding board, if you will, to go and speak in safety. We often talk about psychological safety so much in technology world today, but if you think about it, even 20 years back, that psychological safety was in fact given to me, saying, okay, you can safely speak what you want, by the culture that was set up in the organizations that I've worked with. That's actually a telling a tale for from a HR perspective, right? It doesn't happen automatically. It doesn't.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of the individual as well as what the organization also, just kind of promotes as a culture. It can be both. So that's, like I said, for me, it's kind of worked very well for me in that sense that I've been with an organization that encouraged you to provide those safe spaces. And it's interesting that you talk about safe spaces because in the last 2, 3 years, I've been working on, I've also become an executive coach. So I've been coaching a lot of leaders. So people who probably started their career journeys around the same time I did, and just how life has changed for them, and whether it was in technology or in any other space. And that's one of the things that we completely emphasize on, that you create a safe space for you to just be able to be vulnerable in that space, to really talk about what it is that you want to do. No judgments passed, no one's going to use that against you. And it's been very interesting to just talk to some of these leaders who joined the technology industry 20 years back, and to see how successful they are. And if you were to see them from outside, you wouldn't actually think that some of them came with some of those insecurities, of just how to help them deal with it, because sometimes it forms a ceiling in their head. It's this invisible factor that they have, which says, I can't go beyond this, right? It's like a barrier. And helping them kind of cross that and to be able to work through that. So that for me has been something that I've been spending a lot of time on in the last the last year or two, doing a lot of coaching with leaders. It's helped with my own personal growth, and hopefully it's helped with the people that I've also engaged with.
Very nicely put, as a coach, right? I mean, I've been a coach for now 6 years or maybe slightly more than that. Actually, often the coach-coachee relationship is very transformational. While it would look from an external world that this the person who's being coached is the one who's changing, but you internally also you have to be changing, transforming yourself to make that
Absolutely.
happen. They play such a catalyst role as a coach, right? You play a catalyst role to say, okay, these feelings that you have is only in your mind. It's a mithya. It's not
Yeah,
really, it's a mirage. It's not really true. It takes a
absolutely.
while.
Yeah, to realize that that barrier is something that only I put up, and that barrier is something that actually doesn't exist in the real world. So just get through it, and it's not going to stop you. Yeah.
Very true, Amrita. I've been having fun in this conversation.
I know.
I know we are past our normal time. Any final thoughts that you want to share with our listeners, Amrita?
So I think, since this was really about, me and my journey in HR, and, just giving someone a peek into what does HR actually do besides just chilling on the HR bay. I think HR, for me, is a hugely important function in way of which you actually work with the employees, whether knowingly or unknowingly, everything that we do, whether it's a one-on-one interaction or whether it is an organization initiative. And I keep going back to that line, and I've probably already said it 5 times, but it's for a reason, that you're really like the lining, right? If you're wearing this really expensive outfit, you've lined it with some muslin, and then you've got the silk on top, but people only see the silk. They don't see the lining cloth underneath, right? And that lining cloth is really the fabric that holds the garment together, gives it its shape, protects it, and all of that. And I think that's the analogy I want to draw for HR, that you don't see us out there in the front. Very rarely. You probably could go through your entire career and not really know who all are there in the HR team. But anything and everything that an employee experiences, there is an HR touch point. It does create the positive experience that employee faces in the organization. And yeah, maybe sometimes the not so great ones, but I would like to think more the better ones than the not so good ones. So HR is invisible at some point in time because that's how we are meant to be, highly impactful.
Thank you so much for coming on board, and lovely to hear you talk about analogies in terms of creating that framework or safety net for organization to do, and being that employee journey to be as pleasant or as
Yeah.
possible. Right? It's amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Thank you
your
so
time.
much, Gayatri. Thank you for having me. And, it was a lovely conversation. I can't believe we've already run out of time. That was faster than I thought.
We thank Siddharth for the music and Anita for promoting the Software People stories.
If you like this episode,
Please subscribe on your favorite podcast client.
And spread the word in your network.
if you'd like to share your story,
Contact us at podcasts@pm-powerconsulting.com.